Thank you for joining. Today we'll discuss what CUI is and how to scope your CMMC environment. By way of a quick introduction, I'm Trinckes, the Director of GRC Services at Elevate Consultant. I have over 2 decades of cybersecurity experience, and I'm also a lead CCA. So let's get started. Let me tell you where most CMMC assessment failures actually begin. Not with a missing technical control, not with a gap in their system security plan. They begin with a wrong scope. I've walked into organizations that scoped too narrowly. They left out systems that were clearly processing CUI because they didn't realize the systems were in scope. I've also walked into organizations that scoped too broadly. They included everything in their IT environment, which inflated their assessment cost and complexity unnecessarily. And I've walked into organizations that generally didn't know what CUI was and assumed their contracting officer had taken care of that definition up for them. Scope is the foundation of your entire CMMC assessment. If the scope is wrong, everything built on top of it is going to be wrong too. The system security plan, the control implementations, the evidence, the SPRS score, that's what this mini class is about. Understanding CUI, getting your scoping right, and what the system security plan needs to document to hold it all together. Let's define CUI, because that is the starting point for everything. Controlled unclassified information is information that government creates or possesses, that an entity creates or possesses on behalf of the government, that a law, regulation, or government-wide policy requires or permits an agency to handle with safeguarding or dissemination controls. There are 2 categories: CUI basic, where the authority requires protection but doesn't specifically or exactly how to protect it, and CUI specified, where specific controls are called out and you must put these controls in place. Here's what I want you to take from this definition. CUI is not classified information. It doesn't carry a top secret or secret designation, but it does require protection. And more importantly, CMMC requires you to prove you're protecting it. The ability to demonstrate that protection is exactly what the assessment evaluates. And here's the practical question you need to answer for your organization. What information do you handle on behalf of the government, and where does it flow? CUI comes in many types. Let me highlight the ones that come up more often in defense contracting. Control technical information, or CTI. This is one of the ones I see most frequently. CTI is technical information with military or space application, such as engineering, drawings, engineering specs, computer software with source code, technical reports. If your organization creates or handles any of that in support of a DOW, Department of War, DOD, Department of Defense contract, that's CUI. Export controlled information is material subject to ITAR or EAR regulations. This may also be common in aerospace and defense manufacturing. If you or your work involves defense articles or dual-use technology, this category is relevant. Privacy. This is where personally identifiable information is collected or maintained in connection with federal programs. It may appear in HR systems, medical records related to federal contracts, and financial information connected to government programs. Law enforcement sensitive is information shared by law enforcement agencies requiring protection from public disclosures. This may be less common in defense contracting, but may present itself in other programs. Here's the practical guidance I give to organizations starting the scoping process. You don't need to memorize every category. There are over 100 of them in the CUI registry. What you need to do is identify which categories exist in your environment and document it. The full CUI registry is publicly available at archives.gov. That's your starting point. CMMC recognizes 4 categories of assets. Understanding these categories is the mechanism for building a scoped assessment boundary, and it directly affects your assessment cost, timeline, and complexity. CUI assets are assets that process, store, or transmit CUI. These are fully in scope and assessed against all applicable CMMC controls, no exceptions. Security protection assets are assets that provide security functions to your environment. Your firewall, your SIM, your identity provider, your endpoint protection. These are all in scope, but assessed for the security function they provide, not as CUI processors. Contractor risk management or managed assets are assets that are capable of processing CUI. A laptop that could access CUI folders, but are controlled by policy and practice to ensure they don't. These must be documented. The assessor is going to verify that the controls you put in place actually prevent CUI from reaching those assets. Specialized assets. These are OT systems, IoT devices, medical devices, test equipment, government-furnished equipment. They may or may not process CUI. Under certain conditions, they may qualify for enduring exceptions, but they must be documented in your system security plan regardless. The goal of asset categorization is to define the smallest defensible assessment boundary that accurately reflects your CUI environment. Not the smallest possible, not the smallest defensible one. This is the one that you need. Those are the two different things. Here's a scoping question most organizations don't ask early enough. How does CUI actually flow through your environment? CUI enters your organization through specific channels: email from a contracting officer, file transfers from a prime contractor, a shared portal, an engineering system. It moves through your environment, stored on servers, processed in applications, transmitted between systems, and it exits in deliverables to the prime contractor or government through cloud platforms or through third-party systems. 3 questions define your assessment boundary. Where does CUI enter your environment? Which systems touch it while it's in your environment? And where does it leave? And who receives it? Your data flow diagrams and your asset inventory must be able to answer all 3 of those questions before your system security plan can be accurately written. If you don't know where your CUI flows, you don't know what to put in your SSP. And if your SSP doesn't accurately reflect your CUI data flows, an assessor will find that gap. This is the exercise I do first with every organization I work with. Trace the CUI, follow it from entry to exit. Every system it touches is in scope. The System Security Plan, or the SSP, is the first document an assessor requests. And there's a very specific reason for that. The assessor uses this SSP to understand your environment before the assessment begins. It tells them what examinations, interviews, and technical tests will be required. It is the map they use to conduct the assessment. If the map is wrong, it doesn't accurately reflect your environment, the assessment becomes significantly more difficult, and the gap between the SSP and reality becomes a finding. The SSP must include a system boundary description, a clear description of what's in scope and why, a description of your environment of operation, physical, logical, and cloud, your identified security requirements and how each one is implemented, connections to the other systems and networks, data flow diagrams that match the narrative, and a defined frequency for updates, at minimum annually, and at any time the environment changes materially. Here's the most important thing I can tell you about the SSP. It is not a compliance document. It is a working document. It must reflect your actual environment, not the environment you intend to have, not the environment you had before your last cloud migration, not the environment you're planning to have after next quarter's infrastructure project. Today's actual environment. Assessors verify that what the SSP describes matches what they actually find. When those two things don't match, that's a finding. One of the most common scoping complications I see in the classification of external service providers. And this is an area where organizations consistently underestimate their scope. An external service provider is any external entity providing IT or cybersecurity services on your behalf, where CUI or security protection data flows through their systems. That includes managed service providers, co-located data centers, hosting providers, and managed security services. Cloud service provider is a specific type of ESP that delivers services via cloud computing. CSPs may have additional requirements. They may need to be CMMC Level 2 certified or FedRAMP Moderate authorized, now certified, or the equivalent. Here's the key rule. If CUI or security protection data, and that includes log data and configuration data, flows through an ESP's assets, that ESP is in scope for your assessment. The most common mistake I see are organizations assume their ESP handles CMMC compliance on their behalf. CMMC does not allow you to delegate accountability. You are responsible for verifying that your external service providers meet the applicable CMMC requirements. You need to know what they handle, how they handle it, and what their compliance posture is. Before your SSP can be complete, you need answers to 2 questions. Which of your service providers touch CUI or security protection data? And can they demonstrate their compliance? 4 things to take from today. 1. CUI is the information your CMMC assessment is designed to protect. Understanding what it is and specifically where it flows in your organization is the starting point for everything that follows. 2. Asset categorization is the mechanism for defining your scope. There's 4 categories. CUI assets fully in scope, security protection assets assessed for their function, contractor risk managed assets controlled by documented policy, and specialized assets that are documented within their applicable treatment. 3. Your SSP must accurately reflect your actual environment, not your intended environment, not your historical environments, the environment that exists today. Assessors verify that what the SSP says matches what they find. When those two things don't match, that's a finding. 4. ESPs and CSPs extend your scope. If they touch CUI or security protection data, they are in scope. And you, not your service provider, are accountable for verifying their compliance posture. Here's the one thing you can do this week. Map your CUI flows, starting with where CUI enters your organization. Step 1. Identify every entry point where CUI arrives. Email from a contracting officer, file transfers from a prime contractor, shared portal, engineering platforms. List them specifically, not emailed generically, but which email system, which accounts, which domains. Step 2. For each entry point, trace where the CUI goes, which systems store it, which systems process it, which systems transmit it onward, to other internal systems, to external subservice providers, back to the government or prime. Step 3. For each system on that list, answer one question. Is it in your current assessment scope? If it is, good. If it's not, you need to understand why not, and whether that exclusion is defensible. This exercise takes 1 to 2 days for most organizations. It will surface scope gaps your team didn't know existed, and it is the prerequisite for everything else. Your SSP, your control implementation, your evidence collection, your SPRS score. You cannot accurately assess what you haven't accurately scoped. If you want to go deeper, the full webinar covers what makes evidence adequate and sufficient for a CMMC assessor, real-world examples of specific controls from the field, and the tips that actually move the needle on your SPRS score, including what the False Claims Act means for the person who signs off on it. Link is in the description. See you there.